Good afternoon, Trump family. Welcome to Open Source News. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on that notifications bell so you don't miss a thing. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Let's get into the news this Tuesday morning. It looks like NPR is losing money big time. Sponsors are abandoning them. I wonder is because if they're fake news, NPR does not need to be funded with any of our taxpayer dollars. They need to be defunded by the US taxpayer because they are truly one-sided. They only support one side of the spectrum. And that is the establishment. That's all they care about. They can care less about the people of this nation. And they will report the way they want to report to continue to muddy the waters, and continue to spread disinformation and misinformation as a corporate media handler of the Democrat Party does consistently. And so seeing this headline, seeing them losing $20 million, and of course, sponsors ditching them brings joy to my heart. That's right. I want the whole outfit absolutely destroyed. I want no remnant of NPR to last. So let's kind of dive into what we have here. It says NPR loses $20 million in corporate sponsorships implementing a hiring freeze. That's right. The left-wing media is hurting. NPR has announced a hire freeze so they can avoid layoffs. NPR is going to need to cut at least $10 million in spending. NPR chief says Long Landlines announced a $10 million cut would get them back to $5.2 million deficit for the year. NPR will need to Atlanta. He told staffers at a memo he intended to avoid layoffs but would be forced to severely curtail hiring, amounting to what he described as a close to total hiring freeze, and network will sharply cut back discriminatory spending and non-essential travel to $10 million. Cut constituents approximately 3% of NPR's current annual budget. As we did during the pandemic, we pride towards our staff and not anticipate layoffs at this time. Lansing Rowe. He noted he recognized the strain of a near freeze on hiring would put on NPR's current job journalists, paid propagandists, and in their non-newsroom colleagues. It means we won't have the skills or support for the people who have been in the roles that must remain vacant. Clancy wrote, for those working long and stressful hours. This is not good news. But it's the reality we can't avoid if we want to save jobs. NPR expects to have lost at least $20 million in corporate sponsorships, and network heads had expected this sponsorships to be the biggest source of revenue. It was expected to be 42% of NPR total income. Well, that's not turning out very well for them. That's fantastic. Maybe sponsors are figuring out there are a bunch of fake news liars who continue to spread misinformation, disinformation onto the public, and they're maybe not wanting to have to deal with that any longer. So we'll see how NPR continues to move along. But hopefully, in the long run, it will go bankrupt and it will be defunded and it will be dismantled, and we will no longer have a public national broadcasting thing that only reports for Democrats. And this is some big news. Arizona's Katie Hobbs is in some hot waters. Internal email leaks reveal that her office colluded with Twitter officials to silence so-called election misinformation. We're gonna take an in-depth look at the leaked emails. We're gonna see how lawmakers are now calling for federal investigations, and stick them to the very end of this video when I'll reveal precisely why this may all be just the tip of the iceberg. You are not going to want to miss this. Another culprit has been exposed as part of the ongoing saga known as the Twitter files released by Elon Musk. We now know that on January 7, 2021, the communications director for Katie Hobbs, Secretary of State office, emailed an organization known as the Center for Internet Security, an organization that deals with supposedly online misinformation. The subject line in the email was election-related misinformation, and the email reads, "I'm flagging this Twitter account for your review." Again, this is from Katie Hobbs, Communications Director. The Misinformation Department at the Center for Internet Security then forwarded the message along to an employee at Twitter, writing, quote, "Please see this report below from the Arizona Secretary of State office. Please let me know if you have any questions." Twitter wrote back, "Thank you. We will escalate." About 7 hours later, a Twitter employee wrote back, "Thank you." Both tweets have been removed from the service. And interestingly, copied on this response was an employee at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a branch under the federal government's Department of Homeland Security. Christina Bobb have One American News basically summarized the revelations by tweeting out, "Unreal. Katie Hobbs' his office contacts Twitter to have posts removed so the Democrat candidate who ran the Arizona election censored our political opponents, disrupted election day votes, and then threatened counties with prosecution if they didn't declare her the winner. Now, that latter point, of course, stems from revelations that Katie Hobbs' office threatened to arrest Mojave County Board of Supervisors if they didn't certify the 2022 election by Monday's deadline. This according to documents obtained by the Daily Caller. The Mojave County Board of Supervisors were, of course, like many others, very concerned about the insane number of irregularities and eruptions that occurred throughout Maricopa County on Election Day, as well as the slow walking of results and stonewalling of handing over information precisely just how bad the election day disruptions and irregularities were. So Katie Hobbs, remember, refused to recuse herself from overseeing the election and therefore, by implication, was in charge of counting her opponent's votes. We now know that Katie Hobbs has a history of colluding with Twitter to actively suppress political opinions that she didn't like, and now we're seeing a comparable weaponization of the law in order to silence what many believe to be legitimate dissent given her own electoral incompetence. Kerry Lake, of course, has responded to these revelations, tweeting out coercion and corruption. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, if you remember, was actually suspended indefinitely from Twitter under the old woke regime. She wasn't having any of this. She tweeted out, "The Secretary of State of Arizona and Governor candidate Katie Hobbs used the power of the Arizona Secretary of State to collude with Twitter to unconstitutionally violate First Amendment rights of Americans for her own political gain. This is communism and Hobbs cannot be governor. I'm calling for a federal investigation." Todd Starnes tweeted out another Twitter bombshell. Arizona Secretary of State Katie Hobbs was in regular communication with Twitter, telling them who to censor, and Twitter complied. Arrest them all. And to that end, Republican Representative Troy Nehls on Friday assured patriots across the nation that investigations are indeed coming into the involvement of government officials have had in censorship campaigns at Twitter. And over the weekend, Speaker of the House hopeful Kevin McCarthy said that investigations need to be extended to Facebook and Google as well. Everyone listen to this. Lie to the American public. What Elon Musk has been able to do now, we know why the White House wanted to fight so strongly against him. Owning Twitter, all he's done is put out the truth. Now we need to start looking at Facebook, at Google. These now have become all arms of the Democratic Party, arms of the Biden administration, but they also used the intel community as well to lie the American public. Should those people keep their clearances? Should those people still be allowed to have information? If they're going to be political individuals, then? No, they should not. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we need to investigate. Yeah, going forward. Okay, folks, and so investigations are coming. And with all of these ridiculous corruptions going on in plain sight, I shouldn't have been surprised when I was recently shown just how easy it is to actually access the deed to my house, and not just access it, but actually change it. Now, as I noted, this rather damning revelations about Katie Hobbs is all part of what's been called the Twitter files. Right over the weekend, Elon Musk released what promises to be just the first many more massive bombshells to come against the whole of the establishment. We're talking the deep state, right? The three-letter agencies, Democratic Party operatives, and of course big tech, all in terms of how they collude with one another. Elon made the first dump of emails and internal communications within Twitter available to Substack journalist Matt Taibbi over the weekend, who published them in a torrent of tweets, a thread of just over 40 tweets revealing the inner workings of how Twitter employees, politicians, and deep state operatives colluded together to deliberately censor the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop bombshell that exploded on the scene October of 2020. We now know, of course, that the FBI had Hunter Biden's laptop in their possession for months before November 2020. We know that they knew that it was genuine, that it was for real, and that the information contained in the laptop, particularly in relation to Sleepy Joe's involvement with Hunter Biden's illicit business dealings, the big guy and all, was enough to implode the Biden campaign. So even though all of this was known, nevertheless, those same FBI officials regularly met with Twitter employees as well as Facebook employees, and tipped them off to a supposedly impending Russian disinformation campaign involving Joe Biden that they needed to look out for and censor. And then boom, the New York Post reveals the Hunter Biden laptop. And literally immediately Twitter sprung into action. Suppress the story. They shut down the New York Post Twitter account for freaking 2 weeks. They even shut down the then White House spokesperson, Kayleigh McEnany, his Twitter account, just for daring to share the story. And then, of course, right on cue, 50 former intelligence officers all signed a letter declaring that the laptop was nothing more than Russian disinformation, which they all knew was untrue. They all knew they were lying when they said that. We now have all the internal communications behind the scenes at Twitter that shows just how deep this collusion between the deep state Democrat politicians and social media went. And this Katie Hobbs revelation is just the tip of the iceberg, or as Elon Musk put it, more smoking guns are on the way. So we'll certainly be keeping our eyes on how things develop here with the ongoing Twitter files, but there's no question the jig is up. The cat is out of the bag and the establishment is ripe for a massive implosion. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Open Source News. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so